Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of my podcast channel, Data Science with Sam. Today, we're going to discuss about actual science and what's the future of actuaries in collaborating with data scientists that can reshape the insurance industry. To that purpose, I joined by an esteemed guest from Actual community, Charles Johnson. He's a CEO at Actual Development Institute and a seasoned actuary. Charles, welcome to the session. I'm very happy to have you here.
Thanks so much, Sam. Really appreciate you taking the time to have me on. I think we got a lot of fun stuff to talk about today, so I'm excited.
Sure. So as you said, there's a lot of fun stuff to talk about, so let's get down to that. So to start with the discussion, obviously, I'm more curious to know about your journey in the actual science space. So obviously, my viewers and listeners would be interested to know about how you became an actuary and how you started the journey in the first place. So my first question would be obviously kind of like, what motivated you to become an actuary in the first place? So if you could literally giving us a little bit of a historical rundown of that, that'll be great.
Yeah, that's a great question. My journey was non-traditional. Usually when we say non-traditional in the actuarial field, we talk about like career changers or people learning late. The traditional path being you go to college, you get an entry-level job. So it was traditional from that sense. But why I became an actuary is pretty non-traditional. I didn't know what it was. I was a psychology major. To give you some background, when I was young, when I was a teenager, I was a less than stellar student. I had lots of challenges and issues that teenagers do, and I found the field of psychology fascinating. I loved helping people. I wanted to understand how people worked, how to become happier myself, how to make other people happy. But I come from a family of engineers, and like having any professional background in your family, there's at least some pressure. And so I was constantly reminded that to be a good psychologist, you need to get your PhD, and it takes a long time. And I remember working my first job and thinking, it was a terrible job, like cold call telemarketing. Like if you see in the movies where there's like a long table, and you have like the corded phones in a phone book, and there's just like people sitting there calling. Like that was my first job. It was terrible. It was 100% commission. I didn't make minimum wage, but I still liked doing that more than I liked just traditional academic school. So I was like, man, I want a job. Like I want a job where I can make money. And so I went to my advisor and I said, I want to be an engineer. And she said, well, we don't have engineering in our school. At the time I went to Illinois State. So the first thought that crossed my mind was, I guess I'm going to have to switch schools. And she said, well, changing majors, it could be challenging. What classes have you taken? Yeah. And I said, I've been taking calculus class. My mom got her MBA, and she always said, and I'm sure you as a data scientist can empathize with this, but it's so hard to relearn math. So just like keep educating yourself all the time. That's the easiest approach. So I just kept taking calculus classes, and she said, well, we have this really ridiculously hard math major. So why did I become an actuary? It was these two questions. I said, well, what's the hire rate out of college? And she said, if you can graduate with a degree, you'll almost certainly find a job in the field. And I was like, oh, that's promising. I said, well, how much do they make? And she said, you should be making 6 figures within 3 to 5 years out of school. And I said, I'm going to do that. She's like, it's really hard. I was like, I don't care. I'll figure it out. I want to do whatever that thing is. That sounds like the job field I'm looking for. So it was a very steep learning curve, very challenging. I was not prepared to be an actuary. It was way harder than I could have possibly imagined. But what I found was that the demands placed on me, to study for exams, to learn really difficult mathematics, I loved the kind of person I became in the pursuit. And I think it's one of the reasons I'm so passionate about it now. I think understanding probabilistic thinking, financial mathematics, all the different fields that you kind of have to learn to become an actuary. And then the process of like taking exams outside of an academic classroom, which is really about like self-education. So embracing self-education and consistency, applying it to highly technical fields. I loved all of that. And then I love the people too. When you get your first job and you're surrounded by these incredibly intelligent, hardworking, it's a humbling process going through the exam. So, most actuaries don't have that big of an ego. You kind of get knocked down in the process. So I just enjoyed, the culture of it as well.
Oh, that's great. It's kind of like fascinating to see the way you kind of like switch your career path. And I mean, even if you come from an engineering background, you have a background in your family, but you decided to go with the actuaries. I mean, obviously, you do have passion for mathematics and scientists, and the statistics part. But I really agree with you. Actuaries is kind of like a lucrative option when it comes to choose a career path, or maybe start making kind of a handsome figure of salary, like within a few years of the professional career. So yeah, I definitely agree with that. And being a data scientist, I had the privilege of working with a lot of actuaries, and I could tell that some of the actuaries whom I met throughout my professional journey had a kind of a similar sort of like I would say the career journey like you, and like I totally resonate that. And one thing I wanted to mention, since you mentioned the calculus and other stuff, okay? So just for my listeners or viewers, some aspiring students who are kind of like listening this podcast, do you think when you started this actual journey or started taking the exam, did you have to like go back to your like mathematics classes, or start relearning all those stuffs, or you already had that foundation ready and that helped you to pass all the exams in the first place? I mean, I guess some students would be interested to know about that. So I thought of, bringing the question to the table.
That's a really good question. So rarely have I found collegiate programs where the class curriculum is sufficient to pass an exam alone. You have to study in addition to the classes. So for my first two exams, I after the classes, within, I don't know, 6 months of finishing a class, I was studying or sitting for the exam. After I passed the first two exams, I began studying for exams before the classes. And I actually talk to students about this a lot. I think for the first two exams, like the content is so foundational. It's less the math and more the frame of thinking, right? I always appreciated that in college classes. Like, yeah, I go and learn about world history, and so I know some facts about the history of the world. But what I really gleaned was, by the end of the semester, I got to view the world through the lens of what historians think about and look like, why things are the way they are today. And so just having a guide for those first two exams is really important. But even if you're in a really fortunate position where you might have 5 exams in your college curriculum, which is an intense workload for an undergraduate, you will inevitably have to take exams without coursework. So I very much believe that from day one, like the most important thing to becoming an actuary, and I mean, it's kind of a foundational skill set in general, is self-studying. Like, you should study on your own a topic that is not required by your class load, like once a day, even if it's like 10 minutes. Just get in that habit of consistently looking at material and trying to self-educate. And I think that's interesting. I mean, I'm curious.
Charles, I lost you.
And I'm back, right?
Yes, you're back.
Okay. I was thinking about this before I got on the call today, about the experience of professional data scientists, right? Like, I imagine comparing it to something like the field of plumbing, right? Like, fluid dynamics doesn't change over time. And while there are probably some advancements in material science, like fundamentally how you build like plumbing for a building hasn't changed radically. But the field of data science, it's radically changing continuously. So like, to be good at your job, and self-education must be like so important.
I mean, I can give you my thought process on that. I think somebody, it was like a data scientist from a very big tech industry company. I don't remember it was from Apple or Google. He made a very good comment about data scientists. Data scientist is kind of a computer programmer who is better in statistics than the traditional developers. But they are like not very good in software engineering cases as compared to a developer. So if you want to be a data scientist, you have to learn the statistics, and you have to be better than other traditional programmers and developers out there. But from the web development or any sort of like a programming language standpoint, you can go by that if you just know a very specific programming language. However, that notion has been changing right now. So that definition is not at all valid at this moment, because when I took my data science program, I realized that I had to learn even a JavaScript. I had to learn even go back to all my web development classes, because now, the data science role is so demanding that industry practices require us to come up with a proof of concept. So if I build a model and if I can't demonstrate that model by deploying it in production, or build like a POC app, like proof of concept app, then that's like useless. So it's like going back to the same thing, you gotta like self-learn certain tools and technologies that were not taught by the program, the degree program that you went through just to get your data science. Sometimes you gotta study more or self-learn some of the new toolkits or programming language that'll help you in your industry job. So I feel like the actuaries are something like that. I mean, even if you go through your ASA or if it's a program, when it comes to industry job, you might need to learn different programming language. You might need to learn a different toolkits as kind of like correlates with your data analysis, your analytics, or any risk assessment practices. Like while working with the actuaries, I've seen that we used a lot of third-party software, vendor, whether it's Spacial or from Polysystem or any other companies. And I've seen that actuaries had to learn those softwares, and those softwares are kind of like, it's an accurate knowledge that they need to learn while doing their jobs, and something they are not, they didn't study during their actual program. So I think that's where actually I feel like as actuaries and data scientists, we kind of go through same rigorous learning curve. It just our paths are different. We got a different degree, but it's when it comes to self-learning, I think these two roles are like will be continuously evolving, and we'll still learn more things about industry practice and other stuff in future. So that kind of brings me to my next question. Since you're talking about the future, right? How this role is going to shift. So how do you envision the future of this actuarial role in the insurance industry? Because obviously the actuaries are kind of like a backbone in a certain insurance company. So do you think this role is going to just continue doing the same risk assessment or something, they have been doing for a certain, so-and-so company, or this role is going to evolve into something else, which we haven't, imagined or we never saw, like 30 to 40 years of our insurance career. So just for like a hypothetical question,
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, it's a fascinating question. Obviously one that actuaries, around the world wrestle with. So I kind of want to paint a picture though first, like understand before we talk about like where we're going. I was just writing this morning about like this road of life that we're on, that like we have to make sure we know where we're going, but we have to like appreciate the scenery of where we're in. So let me just like paint the picture of where we're in. So I'll throw a couple facts out there. The first one is that by regulation, actuaries are required right now, right? Like why are actuaries and insurance so intertwined? If you think about data scientists, data scientists work in a very broad set of fields, but almost all actuaries work in or consult for insurance. And why is that, right? Sure, we have overlapping skill sets, but certainly finance, economics, financial mathematics, probability, those concepts are used in a wide variety of industries. The reason they're so densely demanded in insurance is because of the regulatory requirement. So like, our actuary is going to be totally 100% replaced by anyone or anything. Like, no, I think I would be hard pressed to see regulations changing. So that's one. That's kind of the foundational demand of actuaries, is every insurance policy is required to be signed off by an actuary. Now let's look at another one, which is just the general job market for actuaries right now. We talk about great job demand, job security, pay. 7% job demand or job vacancy. 7% of the actual jobs out right there currently vacant. 1% unemployment, right? Yeah. So the number of job openings relative to the people is significant. And the number of people going into the profession, the number of students going into the major in school has gone down. They're 30, 40% off of their peak over the last 5 years. So what you see is a job that's necessary, that is well established in a specific industry, but is facing challenges in employment. So I want to give you one other fact. So I have talked to several startup insurance companies. And if you look, I mean, of the insurance companies I've talked to, the average number of actuaries at that company is like 2 or 3.
Okay.
While the average number of data scientists might be 100 or 50. So there is no doubt that historically speaking, some of the work done by actuaries can be replaced. And I think when you look at the credentialing organizations, the way that they're changing the content of the exams, they want to make sure that the actuaries of the future can still fulfill those roles. But just because they can doesn't mean economically they will. I think as long as companies cannot get work done, the penetration of data scientists into traditional actuarial roles will continue. So I don't know where it's going to go. Like, I would love to say that this is where I'm driving it. Certainly I have a vision and I'm hoping to create pathways of the future. But I think the larger laws of supply and demand in economics will eventually drive the profession. And it might just be, hey, you know, we need consulting actuaries to sign off on all of our pricing, and the data scientists of the future could replace a lot of what actuaries do. Me personally, what I see is the opportunity. Like, I think of opportunity that actuaries have. So let me ask maybe another, again, I'm trying to paint the scenery here. How many people with data science degrees took financial accounting in school?
That's a really good question. So one thing I would definitely tell you that, I mean, again, I didn't actually know the exact statistics off the top of my head, but one thing I'm pretty sure about that, the most of the data scientists, at least what I've seen in different financing, accounting, and insurance industry, are not too very significant in the sense of like where we are doing the traditional insurance business, like a big insurance companies. I've seen the number between actuaries and data scientists are kind of similar, and I feel like the actuaries are more for like a majority, like a workforce in the big insurance companies compared to data scientists. However, I think the data scientists, the importance of data scientists are coming up more in the insurtech companies. Like, for example, as you mentioned that, like you already started discussion with some of the startups. And most of the startups are kind of, I would say, tech-based insurance company, because like Lemonade and others, insurtech companies that came up. And I feel like their business is more oriented towards automating their pricing adjustment or underwriting practices than going through the traditional practices, which maybe big insurance companies have still been doing. And I feel like that's why that there is a little discrepancy in terms of actual workforce versus data scientists. But going back to your question, I think in the finance accounting area, we still have a lot of data scientists, but still the number is not to that level where it could be something that, the data scientists can take over some of the actual functionalities, because we still need actuaries for the pricing assumption. I don't think so. As a data scientist, I can't tell you that I have the skill set to give approval on companies' pricing assumptions or any sort of other actual judgmental stuff, because that is something that responsibility should lies within actuaries. So being a data scientist working with the actuaries, I'm in a position that I can at least vouch for my opinion and tell people that actuaries and data scientists is something they should have a segregation of duties. It's not like the data scientist is going to take over actual role or vice versa. That data scientist should take over some of the roles that can be automated or kind of like minimalistic operations in the insurance world, whereas actuaries should focus more on some of the areas where they can utilize their subject matter expertise, like pricing assumption, or maybe working with the underwriters to give them more, better acumen for the risk assessment, the valuation stuff, even cash flow testing and the ICAM related stuff. So yeah, so I think that the proportion of data scientists actually is still the kind of like same at the balance in between. But I'm kind of like a little surprised to know that there are more data scientists working in the insurance company than actuaries, which should not be the case. And I hope after this discussion, people would start realizing about that, and they'll start hiring more actuaries in this insurtech companies, because there are certain functionalities still need to be done by the actuaries, and we can't rely on data scientists.
I mean, we'll see, right? The economics bears the result, right? If they are able to be successful and compliant, then maybe they've stumbled onto a way of structuring and doing business. I mean, I also find it interesting, the resilience of the insurance industry as a whole, right? Yeah. We're very slow to change. We're very hard to disrupt. You know, one of my favorite quotes is, selling insurance is one of the only products where you don't know if you made money after you've made the sale. You know, most products you sell it and you're like, I know what my profit margin is immediately. But with insurance, sometimes you don't know for decades, depending on the product you're selling. Yeah. And so certainly when you think about the skill sets of actuaries, those long-term contingencies, and particularly, and the point I was trying to make, by the way, just taking a step back, when I asked, you know, do most data scientists take financial accounting, is that the idea that I think where actuaries need all the skills that data scientists have, I really don't sit in that camp. What I think actuaries are really good at is the understanding and application of multidisciplinary areas. We understand financial accounting. We understand the balance sheet, the income statement. Every actuary is credentialed in economics. We take micro and macroeconomics and prove that we understand that concept area. So yes, we understand statistics and probability and risk, and we're building predictive models as part of our examination process now. But I think fundamentally where actuaries thrive is in the application. When we talk about collaboration between data scientists and actuaries, the point I'm trying to make is where that line is drawn right now, I think is still very fuzzy. And there is increasingly the trend at the industry level of insurance is that roles and responsibilities for actuaries are increasingly being done by non-credentialed actuaries. And to your point, you know, you said they should hire more actuaries. But remember, there aren't actuaries to hire. The job vacancy rate is 7%. The unemployment rate is 1%. But the demand to get those things done is still there. So it's going to force companies to figure out other ways to get that work done.
Yeah, that's a really valid point. I mean, you mentioned, because we don't have a lot of actuaries. Because now, if I consider, from data science perspective, we are taught to work with the subject matter expertise in different industry verticals to carry out data initiative, or even building a quantitative modeling or predictive model that can influence the business decision. So now, when it comes to insurance industry, the subject matter expertise are actuaries. So that's the point I wanted to make. Actually, I was trying to make in one of the previous coffee chat sessions, and I was trying to make that data scientists will not be able to function without actuaries if you're trying to, do some risk assessment practice, or you're trying to do some predictive modeling, coming up with some sort of analysis based on historical record. We still need to work with the data actuaries. And if companies have started thinking that, oh, data scientists are going to fill those actual role, they're mistaken. I mean, going back to the same point, as you mentioned, that, whether data scientists are going to, they went through the same rigorous financial accounting course to understand how the balance sheet work, or how they can actually influence the predictive modeling. No, they are not. We are not. So I can give you one example. Like, say, suppose I'm trying to build a predictive model just to predict the lapse rate or mortality, whatever.
Yeah,
in that classic. Being a data scientist, I have to rely on actuaries to lock down on some of the predictors. Okay, so yeah, obviously I can build a model. I can write the code in R or Python and coming up with a GLM or linear regression or any models. But I still have to rely on an actuary to understand and analyze my data and the output, and also give me, I would say, suggestion on what kind of predictors that I could use to kind of adjust the prediction so it could reduce the R square, or maybe improve the accuracy or something like that. I don't think if a data scientist would try to do that, obviously we can do that. We can definitely build a predictive model, but how accurate that would be from insurance industry or business standpoint, that we cannot provide assurance for. So I hope those insurtech companies, the startups, would take that into consideration. But as you said, their hands are tied because there are not many actuaries out there on the market, which is why I think it's more useful maybe for a data scientist who wants to work in the insurance industry, try to think about taking some programs, actual program, and maybe just come up with a hybrid role where they would learn something about actual programs, by going through the program, and they can, obviously bring their data science knowledge. So maybe having a hybrid role could alleviate that resource shortage scenario a little bit, where a data scientist can fill in a little bit actual functionalities. But yeah, I mean, but again, I just want to be very come clear on this, that being a data scientist, I don't think so I went through a program where I was specifically taught about finance or accounting or insurance business domain knowledge. But I was told that you need to work with the subject matter expertise in certain business vertical to drive their business, initiatives. So I guess that's, hopefully that answers your question, or at least provide some clarity on the data science responsibility in the finance or insurance industry.
Yeah, we touched on a lot of good stuff there. We can move on to the next question. I'm sure we're going to come back and continue talking about.
Yeah, so it's a kind of a very, as I say, the thin line is very fuzzy between data scientists and actuaries. They're still trying to figure out what's the segregation of duties among themselves, but it is at this moment.
And maybe to go back to your initial question, that the future of actuaries, where I believe, like when we look at the curriculum change, we're trying to encapsulate more of understanding data science, because we're increasingly dependent on data scientists and data science modeling. So we're adding this curriculum of understanding to it. But I think increasingly the value that actuaries can add to the business is in the risk and finance side. Understanding the data science models in context of the business. And so I think it's really increasingly defining actuaries as like almost financial engineers. Because like ultimately what we do is we design financial products that exist in the marketplace. We build insurance products, we set up investment programs, we do asset and liability management, we do risk quantification, and we need to understand and leverage data models. But I think in no way, if you're trying to say, let's build the actuarial profession to be more like the data science profession, that's going to be a successful job path of the future. I think that we should increasingly demonstrate the value that we have that are different than data scientists, and allow data scientists to thrive on the skill set that they have and leverage it as a partner.
I think that's kind of like bringing me to the next question, is like, again, same thing, the growing partnership between actuaries and data scientists in the insurance industry. As you mentioned, that actuaries are going to bring their subject matter expert and work with the actuaries. So do you think this collaboration will continue to grow in future, where actuaries will be more, like I would say, flexible to work with the data scientist and vice versa? Or do you think it's gonna be more depends on the company's objectives? Like, as you mentioned that, there's some of the startups are basically hiring more data scientists compared to actuaries, maybe because of the resource shortage. So what do you think about that? Like, is it the partnership would grow in future, or do you think like more knowledge transfer in between these two roles?
Yeah, that's another really good question. So first, right, insurance industry is one of the most data-rich industries that there is. So the success, just again, think about it from a natural competition, like a capitalistic standpoint. The companies that can leverage the data to make the best business decisions are the ones that will succeed. So it's less about what do people who run insurance companies think. It's almost what are the economic imperatives going to be? Will you be successful? What's the right mode to success? So from that standpoint, like it's inevitable that data scientists are going to continue to play a larger and larger role in insurance. It's just inevitable that there's such an immense data. There's such a complicated form of from the investment side to the operations side to the actual insurance products themselves. The ability to use data science, predictive modeling to build data science models will be core to the business. And I think from that standpoint, it does make sense that actuaries become increasingly knowledgeable of what data science is. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, our job has to be on the business side. That's truly what I believe the future is. And I also think that's the greatest opportunity, which is bringing actuaries outside of traditional insurance to continue that partnership, to help work with data science and data science modeling, to use them in business settings to create positive financial results. Yeah. Right. Actuaries quote this all the time. I don't know if you know this, Sam, if you can verify this is true, but 80% of data science models that are built don't end up actually getting used. Do you know if that's true?
Yep. That's true.
Yeah,
It doesn't go
yeah,
to production because most of the cases we are literally bogged down with building some of the models that are not so sustainable or not providing the accuracy that we are looking for.
yeah. And I don't know if that's necessarily a comment on the business understanding and more just like the natural, what happens when you're trying to predict a complex result.
And I feel like most of the cases, I think the main barrier is most of those models might not have that the business influence or the knowledge it requires to build a model. And that's where I feel like, again, it's again, I guess, a good avenue to think about the partnership. Maybe in that case, an actuary would help a data scientist to build a better model by influencing the decision, or maybe help them that how they can come up with a better feature selection, or maybe a predictors that could, help them to build a better model for any prediction purpose. And I think that's where the partnership would be more important, because from a data science perspective, again, we are efficient in coding the for efficient in like a programming for the for building the model, whether it's quantitative or qualitative, it doesn't matter. But we need to work together with actuaries to understand how we can make the model better, or maybe that will influence the business decision in future. Without actuaries, I don't think so that partnership would yield into something, or eventually what will happen, that most of the models that a data scientist will build will wind up just stuck in the development space, never move to production, or never become a kind of a sustainable model for the firm. So yeah,
and I think within the insurance industry, we see several use cases where like it's just such a slam dunk, like building underwriting models, like automated underwriting models. Like every great team is a mix of data scientists and actuaries, and the business results are clear. The data is really rich. It's a very interesting dynamic process that's evolving. But what I wonder, and I'm curious from your perspective, is do you see opportunities outside of insurance for that kind of collaboration where actuaries don't really proliferate right now?
You mean outside of insurance industry, where actually is not pretty much like a common figure over there.
Yeah, but
honestly,
data scientists are.
Yeah, that's a really good thing you brought up, because I think a few months back I was reading a story where they mentioned that Apple is trying to, our big tech company Apple is trying to hire some actuaries for their risk modeling practices. I'm not sure very much about what's their main goal or strategy behind that. And I know Apple has already started their own finance division. We have Apple Card. We all use that, like for our transaction purpose. So I feel like in future, again, this is just my kind of like opinion on that, that slowly these big techs and other companies are trying to understand their value in the business. And I don't know from the actual standpoint, is there any other risk assessment or risk management practices that can be applicable to other businesses other than insurance? But I feel like when it comes to finance, when it comes to like, I would say a money-making engine, actuaries still be responsible. We can still use actuarial skill set to understand the risk behind it. And I'm pretty sure that that is the main reason why some of the big tech companies already started an avenue to start, hiring actuaries. And obviously, the big techs are filled with data scientists because they drive most of the data initiatives over there. And I never worked for any of the big tech, so I don't know what's going on inside. But I won't be surprised if those actuaries are closely working with data scientists to maybe amplify their data risk practices, or even also like having a more of like a knowledge transition session in between. It's just more of like these two roles can be mutually benefited more from each other. Like talking about insurance industry, data scientists can learn more about asset liability management or some of the insurance business domain functionalities. I think similarly, if an actuaries would work in a non-insurance industry, I feel like they would be more exposed to some of the, I would say, technology or some of the programming language or some modern platforms that would help them to maybe make a better model. Maybe that will also minimize their timing, like running an operational practices. So an actuaries can literally like spend time on learning something, or spending time more on applying some different mathematical formula or whatever. Okay, because so many times I've seen in my in like a lot of organizations that actuaries are also like running a lot of business operation practices, and that also takes a lot of time. So what if, like they work more with the data scientists, were aligned with tech industry, and try to automate some of the like operation process, so actuaries can spend more time in coming up with a different formula, or maybe building a better pricing assumption model. So again, it's
Yes.
just more of like I would say a hypothetical opinion, my 2 cents on that. But that's where the industry moving, insurance industry, and I'm pretty sure that movement already started in other areas. And I think insurance industry or finance industry is slowly getting into that, with more collaboration between actuaries and data scientists. So I
Yeah.
guess.
So I'm going to go back to your original question, which was, what does that collaboration look like? And I guess maybe this might be unpopular, but I think it's successful in insurance.
Yeah.
Like the collaboration on average
You
does
can see
work.
that there's like a
Yeah.
outcome, positive outcome of that.
Yeah. And the trend I'm seeing is, I think, that point you made at the end, where there are increasingly things that actuaries do as part of their job that can be filled by other roles and are by natural supply and demand.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good thing for the industry. And to your point, actuaries will learn a lot more on the job by having those collaborations, by working with partners that have deep knowledge in an area that isn't purely the actuarial curriculum. Like, yes, we can continue to self-educate, but at the same time, we're taking our FSA exams. Data scientists are doubling down and diving deeper into their statistical and software bases that actuaries just aren't. So like, that's a great opportunity. I think it's going successful. I think the trend will continue that non-actuaries will be in actuarial departments. I think the biggest opportunity for the profession is what you talked about, like with Apple, where getting actuaries to rotate or to work outside of traditional insurance to get viewpoints and perspectives that can change the insurance industry by understanding technology and how technology companies work, but also can expand the value of the profession by demonstrating that a lot of the math and principles that operate inside insurance apply to other industries. Like, I don't know why, but I just think about this, like,
no, I mean,
was an actuary running the asset and liability model at the Silicon Valley Bank?
I mean,
because if they were, they'd go, hey, if interest rates go up, it might not be a good thing for us.
And honestly, with all this fiasco going on right now, as we all know how the Silicon Valley Bank been, the liquidized, and like this recent incident unfolded. I mean, and having an actuary might help you to better manage your risk and predicting the risk beforehand. So I don't think it's a very bad idea to having an actuary who can actually influence some of the decision and safeguard your business from any unforeseeable risk scenarios. And I feel like there will be more importance of actuaries in those big techs or in the Silicon Valley companies. And that also kind of like takes me to another question. I mean, like, it was not part of my question, but since we're talking about this, do you think that will also make some changes in the actual curriculum in future? I know it's too early to say, like when an actuary, like if you think about that, there'll be a growing demand in actuaries outside of insurance industry. Do you think that will also like influence some of the changes in the traditional actual curriculum or the program that actuaries go through or pass the exams to become an actuary?
Yeah, I will say, as a credit to the profession, we are not short on changing curriculum. We do enjoy doing that every 2 years. So the credentialing organization I have, the SOA, one of the best things I think they've done in curriculum changes was adding corporate finance and enterprise risk management. I got my chartered enterprise risk analyst, and I think that perspective of looking at not just like individual product risk and like analyzing data, but looking at large swaths of risk and trying to understand things at the corporate, this aggregate level, is an opportunity that still has a lot of room for actuaries to apply it and demonstrate that skill set. That being said, to your point, yeah, I think the profession tends to be very good at looking at things that have happened historically and trends that are going on, and trying to make sure that the new curriculum that students are going through prepares them as best as possible for the world that they're actually entering.
No, that's very good to know, because at the end, I mean, obviously, Society of Actuaries need to make sure the actuaries are kind of keeping up with the space of, the speed of how the the industry has been evolving when it comes to utilizing their actual skill set to help the business. And I think I remember, I think a few years back, they introduced the predictive analytics course also, right, in their program.
Yep.
Years back, also kind of a growing demand of predictive modeling in others. So yeah, so that's kind of like we kind of like going into that futuristic direction. So I'm going to actually ask the question, which is kind of a very burning question for any other working professional, not only for actuaries. Like being a data scientist, I've seen that a lot of people actually ask me that question that what do you think about this growing popularity of ChatGPT or all this AI replace your jobs? You know, like now we can go to ChatGPT, you can write, you can basically get the full code. You can, if you want to like, you know, ask ChatGPT about a SQL query, it'll give you the end-to-end SQL query. So technically that's kind of like endangers some of the data analysts, data scientists, or data analytics position. And people already started talking about that. There's a conversation going on in different forums that how AI can replace some of the jobs. And I'm definitely, I will give you my opinion later on that. But I want to know about you, from you first, that what do you think about that? Is it that the actuaries also start thinking about that some of those AI programs can replace their jobs in future?
Okay, so this is such a great question. I think about this all the time. So I think this is a nice time to talk about the company I run.
Yeah, exactly. We are literally in the middle of all this.
Yeah, yeah. And so because I think this is kind of a great way to kind of exemplify some of the things I'm trying to drive with my company. So my company's basis is that, you know, I talked about the number of people going into the profession is going down. I've talked about like why I truly fundamentally believe pursuing actuarial science is it's a good thing. That the content you learn, financial mathematics, probabilistic thinking, the habits you form of self-education, I just believe broadly that benefits people's lives. On top of, you know, it's good. It's a good, reliable profession to be in if you want to be in it. But just the pursuit, I think, opens up a world of possibilities. So I work a lot with people, entry-level talent, you know, who is being educated. I work a lot with educational institutions. I present to students a lot to talk about what it takes to be in it now. But I also focus on like, you know, what is the biggest opportunity you have now as students to differentiate yourselves? And I talk about AI all the time. So even in the company I run, I have a few, you know, people who work for me. In onboarding, we just like hired a couple new people. I sat them down and I said, look, part of your job is to figure out how to use artificial intelligence like ChatGPT as much as humanly possible. Like I want you on it every day trying to think of like, how can I utilize this tool to solve problems that the business is facing? And when I go to talk to students, I'm like, look, right now, you are on the precipice of just an absolutely radical change. And before we talk about what this change actually and its implications are, because I think you bring up really good points about replacing versus amplifying work. But I said, look, when you start your jobs, internships this summer, right? We're talking like 3 months from now. ChatGPT came out with like 2 months ago. Right?
Yeah,
in 3 months.
Like late November. Yeah, it's been like 3 months.
Yeah, sure, 4 months. Yeah, 4 months, whatever. Very recently. When you enter the job field, they will have basically no application of using ChatGPT or very limited. Work that is being done right now by actuaries. To your point, like write me a SQL code that does this, that may have taken an hour or 2 hours to write and test can be done in minutes. Yes. If you as students, as entry-level talent can master this one new tool, you will have an opportunity to create an outsized impact in your role that has not been capable, that humans have not been capable of in all of human history. Mm-hmm. That is how radical I believe artificial intelligence is, enabling and changing the way that we're going to do work. So that's just that like that, I think it's core to what we're like, what my mission, what I believe in. And to your point about like replacing work, I'll just pause there, Sam. I mean, your thoughts, and then I'll talk about data science.
I'm just going to say one thing, one quote that I learned from Twitter, and I really like that quote. So I'm going to say that. I think I forgot whoever mentioned the quote, is that AI will not replace your jobs, but a person using AI will. So that literally brings down to the same comment that you made like a few minutes back, that you are literally trying to enabling your your employees to understand the AI and try to make it good use to amplify your business or make a better business decision for your customers. So yeah, so that's the only thing I'm going to say. So you can continue.
Yeah. Okay. I saw that same quote on Twitter. That is so spot on. So that's why I tell students, like, learn how to use it and you'll be indispensable.
Yeah.
I think that, I remember the first national conference I went to as an actuary when I was credentialed. I can't remember the name of the person who spoke, but he talked about predictive analytics. And he talked about specifically why actuaries are so fortunately positioned as a profession as predictive modeling improves. Because ultimately, the results of predictive models are probabilistic. They're not deterministic, right? They might give a most probable answer, but inherently, the answer is a probability space, a variety of possible options. And you and I just take for granted.
Those probabilistic scenarios.
And you and I just take that for granted because you're a data scientist and I'm an actuary, and that is literally how we think and do our job.
Yeah.
But that is not a natural human way to think, right? Like Daniel Kahneman in Thinking Fast and Slow, the Nobel Prize-winning behavioral economist, showed we're bad. Humanity is objectively bad at probabilistic thinking. And unless you really study and practice it,
always bias.
you're going to have so much bias.
Yeah.
And so I think that artificial intelligence, particularly things like ChatGPT, are going to be massive enablers for actuaries, where I don't think it will replace the work, but it will allow us to be significantly more impactful with what we do. Like, to put it another way, I don't think that we're going to run out of work for actuaries.
Yeah.
I think that we will just be able to do different, higher value work.
Sure.
I'm curious your perspective as a data scientist. Now, certainly, again, there's a huge supply-demand issue where there's not enough data scientists. So yeah. I don't think you'll run out of work either. But man, AI is a really powerful tool for building.
One thing I would say that, think about a scenario, and I'm going to actually give you more of like a hypothetical answer that what is the importance of using ChatGPT in the data science world. Think about a scenario. I'm a data scientist. I'm working on certain business use cases, and I don't know a background or certain business term related to that. ChatGPT might help me to, amplify my knowledge so I can basically learn the business at the same time without actuaries, and I can start working on that without relying on a human being to come to me and start teaching me about some of the business terminologies. I know with those informations are available on Google, on internet or search engine, right? But I feel like the ChatGPT has that. I mean, again, it's still not a very robust platform, but it still has that power of summarizing the answer in certain format that you can get everything, which will take you a few minutes to go over multiple links and Google and find out and consolidate those information. So that's where I think the major impact ChatGPT will have in my data science work, that I can get information whenever I want through ChatGPT, and that will help me to amplify and accelerate my work. For my day job or any personal project that I've been doing. So
and I'll even take that one step further. Right now we're using open source information, but in an incredibly short period of time, like on the great grand scales of time, ChatGPT there'll be private versions that companies use where they get to plug in all of their data. Correct. So all of a sudden, it's not just what you can Google, but it's what you can Google and what can be scraped for all of the Yeah, so every underwriter now can just ask ChatGPT a question and it'll scan the entire underwriting manual and give them reasonably good advice. So I think that's another the steepness of learning and onboarding and ability to collect information, especially proprietary information, is going to be
That's a great information, because that's a great thing you point out, because that's the main reason Microsoft already they thought through this and they bought ChatGPT platform. So now when you can actually integrate ChatGPT with internet, it has massive power and you can harness the power to anything. Like, you don't actually have to rely on just a search engine, rather a human-like bot will take care of the search engine part. All you need to do, just ask questions. So you can reducing so much time in going to search engine and looking for information that we usually spend, there's a popular site called Stack Overflow, right? Programmer like me usually go to Stack Overflow all the time when you run into coding issues. Now, I feel like using ChatGPT would minimize that, the exposure to Stack Overflow. I'm not saying the Stack Overflow is going to go away, but in future, we might see a better version than Stack Overflow, where we don't have to look for the answers very theoretically. Rather, we will get the answer through a chatbot, and it'll be more of logical answer than we would have gotten from Stack Overflow. So yeah, I mean, I'm
Yeah.
very excited about all these tools. And that's where I'm glad that actuaries are also on board with that. I'm glad that we have people like you in the community who are continuously exploring those new tools. And not only, you're also like enabling your employee and encouraging people to use those tools that can help actual business practices in the near future.
Yeah. Like I had an intern and I said, hey, can you build me a graphic interface, a form that we need? And she goes, I've never written in that language. So I just typed in the instructions I gave her to ChatGPT and it spit out the code for it. And I said, just copy and paste that in your IDE and you're good to go. Right. Like, it took like 15 seconds.
Exactly.
And and so it actually, we could talk about this forever. I mean,
okay.
It's such a fascinating topic. But you did say one thing that I find that I generated a thought, which is like, how interesting this dynamic that like ChatGPT is really harnessing all of the available information on the internet without giving any credit to creation. And so I almost wonder, is like the creation of information going to slow because it's just so ChatGPT is going to make it so easily accessible. So why would I create or post anything new online? It's just going to be scraped without credit and given, through ChatGPT.
No, that's a really good epic. Actually, that's the concern I have when it comes to generative AI, because it's not, sometimes I feel like it's not very ethical because you cannot trace back to the reference original content. And fortunately, my better half is a research scientist and she works in the academia. And she used ChatGPT from academic standpoint. And as for the academic standard, whenever they refer, cite anything or, write something, they always look for the citation of the particular references. And my better half, my wife told me that that's one of the limitations of the ChatGPT or generative AI, that they are not giving the reference link. I feel like in future, with this integration with Microsoft Bing, can alleviate that. So maybe we could get more of a trustworthy information without having that hallucination impact. But that's one of the limitation of ChatGPT. I'm glad you brought it up, and that's kind of my thought process, that maybe integration with the Microsoft Bing or Google search engine or any like a futuristic search engine might alleviate that, and we would be able to get a trustworthy information, and we can also trace back to validate whether the information is accurate or not. So
yeah, I think John Oliver just talked about this too on one of his latest shows, but like the lack of transparency.
Yeah.
Like the AI generates an answer, but you right now physically can't back out how they got to it.
Yeah. So I think that's, but again, it's still a very fascinating to know that at least we have a bot which can give us some information. The validation part is still on us. We need to make sure that we are validating the proper. Like I had an issue with my research paper that I authored a couple of years back, because when I asked ChatGPT about the original author of that paper, ChatGPT was giving me some misleading information. So those are the limitations of ChatGPT and generative AI, and which I believe they will work on in future. And once the ChatGPT would have access to internet through a search engine like Microsoft Bing, I feel like it would become more powerful and it give us more accurate or trustworthy information. But again, going back to those predictive model, ChatGPT is also a model. It's built on a model. It still has the probabilistic scenario. So that probability is still not 100% or close to 100%. So it's time. An actuary and data scientist would understand that for sure.
Yeah, and I think it's still almost humorously incomplete. Like I'll just give you an example of it, just like the flaws that are still inherent in it. I said, write me a 12-line poem, and it wrote 16 lines. Just something like so simple.
Okay, I never specified. I always ask him to like write a poem. Yeah, I'd check that one. That's a really good catch on that, like on your end.
Yeah. So it is still limited, it's still not, there's no guaranteed accuracy in the information, but I think just inherently as humans, artificial intelligence, speed to answer, access to all information, we just trust it inherently.
Yeah. So, but going back to the original question, so based on your understanding, based one you stated, I mean, actual jobs are going to get amplified, empowered more by utilizing AI tools or like ChatGPT or something, but it'll never going to replace actual jobs. It may be,
but I think it'll affect supply demand. And that's the question. How efficient will it make actuaries so that supply demand of jobs available versus people, like how much does it make it shrink?
No,
And it's a
that's a very
continuum. It's
valid
not
point.
like replace or not. It's like,
Correct.
how
Yeah.
much will
How
it
is it
change
going
that
to
supply
impact
demand?
the supply chain? I mean, maybe there'll be a new job description role that, okay, the next time you look for an actual job, there'll be one responsibility. How, I mean, are you efficient in ChatGPT or, extracting information by using AI tools? Maybe that there should be like a
Yeah.
two-liners in the key responsibilities for an actual position or even for a data scientist position. So
Yeah.
because I wrote I read a couple of papers and they use ChatGPT as an author. And I think there is a paper on PubMed or Nature where they use ChatGPT to derive or extract some of the information. And they gave actually the authorship ownership credit to ChatGPT, which is fascinating. So maybe in that way we might see some sort of like a ChatGPT related skill set in the future, like resumes or even in job description. So yeah, I'm very fascinating about that, and I'm glad to know that like even from the actual standpoint, they are not scared about losing their job or afraid of losing their jobs to AI. Rather, you're embracing this technological innovation and try to see how it can help your job better. So I think we need to have this broader mindset. So that's how we're going to embrace AI and make it to our good use from ethical standpoint, or maybe yeah. Well, I think that's I think that's all I have for now. I mean, I know we had a really good discussion, and but I wanted to actually sum it up by asking you to give us some tips, especially to my listeners or viewers, to see if somebody, an actual aspiring students, are listening to this discussion. So, do you have any tips for our listeners or viewers of this podcast sessions that to become an actuary, what kind of mindset you should have? Forget about toolkit, forget about your mathematical or statistical knowledge. What kind of mindset do you need to become an actuary, and how your organization can help an aspiring student to become an actuary or help them to take actual exams in future? If you just speak a little bit about that, just to sum up this discussion.
Yeah, I'll say three things. The first one is just go to beanactuary.org. I didn't make it. It's a great website. It's a cross collaboration between a lot of people. There is so much content and information. I could not possibly sum it up. If you're interested, that is just such a phenomenal place to start. So that's information. The second one I say would be just habit. I mentioned this at the beginning. I believe this is a habit for all of humanity, but it's table stakes. It's necessity for an actuary, which is self-education every day. I would say one of the things I love about being an actuary is that when you're early on, what you should be studying outside of your classes is clear. There are exam manuals. There's specific, great websites that support the exams that you can literally just sign up and start studying like immediately. Where as a data scientist, there's a million programs you can learn and things. So like figuring out what the right thing is. So as actuaries, it's lucky, but the habit is the same. You have to study every day, even if it's a little bit. You just have. Don't worry about when you take the exam. Just worry about the habit. And then the third thing I'll say is that you have to just get connected and involved. If you're a student at a university, see if there's a club at your university. If there is not a club at your university, reach out to me, Charles Johnson. You can find me on LinkedIn, actuarialdevelopment.com. That's my website. You can reach out to us there. One of our big goals is that, the journey is difficult and it's kind of scary to go alone. So we help connect and build communities for actuaries. And we also host a variety of in-person events that are collaboration between colleges. So there's probably events going on in your area. And then I personally go and speak at colleges, no matter the size of the program, even if there's just a couple students that are interested in pursuing, where I can really dive into the profession, the journey, and what it takes. And be an actuary, great place to start. Study every day if you're looking at something actionable, and then just reach out to me and look around your college to figure out how to get connected to other people in that journey.
Those are some great tips, Charles, and thank you for that. And Thank you for this intriguing discussion. I wish we could continue more because we literally started talking about some of the interesting and futuristic topics, but we'll keep our conversation going and maybe we'll include more actuaries in future. And for my viewers and listeners, just check the video caption and the podcast caption where I would drop, Charles, the website of Charles' company, the actual development.org. He's also a TED speaker. So if you're interested to get some tips about public speaking, please reach out to him on LinkedIn. And that's all for now, Charles. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed our discussion and I'll hope to connect with you in future. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks so much, Sam.